Recently, regulatory risk has been identified as one of the biggest risks in the Nigerian business environment. Meanwhile, a good regulatory regime should ensure a good balance between investors, competitors, consumers, and public interest. The Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry recently undertook a study on what it called transactional accountability process, consistency, and operational transparency. We will be discussing the findings of this report within the larger context of the significance of regulatory governance impact on domestic and foreign investment. Dr. Muda Yusuf, the Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, is here with us. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Yusuf.
Thank you.
Great to have you, Doctor.
Well, those are just mouthful words there. Transactional accountability process, consistency, and operational transparency. I call it grammar. All right, yes. You looked at, in your case study, FIRS and NAFDAC. There are two agencies, you used as this case study for the report. So, but what necessitated the study in the first place?
Well, the study was motivated by the significance of regulatory governance in the economy. In addition to macroeconomic issues that we often worry about, in addition to policy issues, we have since recognized that regulatory quality is a major factor in the investment environment. We are in a situation where we need investment, domestically and internationally. And if the regulatory environment, the regulatory governance does not inspire confidence, then it will be very difficult to be able to attract investment. Now, just as you said in your intro, the whole essence of regulatory governance is to balance the interests of key stakeholders in an economy. The investor is a major stakeholder. It has to be protected by the regulator. The consumer is a major stakeholder. The public is a stakeholder. The society itself is also a factor that has to be taken into account, because all of these stakeholders have different interests. The investor is interested in maximizing profit. The consumer is interested in maximizing the welfare from his limited income. The public is also interested in social stability, the quality of the environment, and stability of the society. So it is the responsibility of a regulator to ensure that all of these variables are captured as they pursue their mandate. Because what we have seen in recent times is that most times, all of these variables are not captured in the way the regulators go about their business. Sometimes we have seen regulators that appear more like revenue-generating agencies than regulators. Their metric as far as performance is concerned is how far they are able to meet their revenue targets.
So they have targets.
They have targets, yes, and that often distracts them from the main essence of regulation. And unless you address these issues holistically within the framework of this core essence of regulatory governance, you'll be doing a lot of harm to the economy, sometimes without knowing it. Because when you say that the economy is not growing, people are losing jobs, capacity utilization is low, a whole lot of it can also be traced to poor quality, the quality of regulatory governance. So regulatory quality is a very, very important factor in an economy, and we need to take it a lot more seriously.
All right, talking about regulatory quality, now, what are the major elements of a good regulatory governance?
Now, to be able to describe a regulatory space as being of high quality, first, the transparency of the regulation, the transparency of the regulatory process is very important. It is not proper for a regulator to just sit somewhere, craft a regulation, and just roll it out. The best practice is that if you have a regulation that you want to put out, there has to be stakeholder involvement. There has to be engagement with the stakeholders so that the quality of the regulation can be enriched, so that the regulation itself can acquire a lot more legitimacy, trust, and confidence of stakeholders. That is the whole essence of transparency in regulatory space. Stakeholder involvement is very important. Then secondly, there has to be what you call regulatory impact assessment. It is not enough for regulators to just roll out policies and they don't care what the impact is. There has to be a framework to ensure regular, periodic regulatory impact assessment. And this doesn't have to be done by the regulatory agency itself, because you may not have a fair assessment.
They can outsource it.
They should have an independent, perhaps an institution like the Nigeria Investment Promotion Commission, whose mandate is to ensure that we have an enabling environment for investors. Or the Ease of Doing Business Office, under the Office of the Vice President. So regulatory impact assessment is very key to ensure that the regulatory environment or the regulatory policies does not hurt unduly any of those critical constituencies. Whether you are talking of the investor, you are talking of the public, you are talking of consumers, or you are talking of society. So that is very key. Then there is need for proper regulatory information. Sometimes you have regulations that people don't even have full information about. So it is important that we have regular dissemination, proper dissemination of information around any regulation, so that the people are aware of all of this. So these are some of the things. Of course, regulation should also be predictable. You don't have a situation where you have a regulatory space where you just wake up the following morning. It's a completely different story. Then there should be a window for redress. We should not have a situation where the regulator is very intimidating. People are so afraid of the regulator. You cannot challenge the regulator. They are the accusers. They are the judge.
The alpha and omega.
Yes, the alpha and omega. Those things don't all go well for the investment environment. So there should be a window for engagement. There should be a window for even resolving disputes between the regulators and the entities that are regulated. So that you don't have, because in this environment, there is this intimidating disposition. There is this culture of coercion by the regulators. These things are not good for the investment environment. So these are the key elements that makes a quality regulatory governance space, which is very critical for the promotion of investment.
Looking at these 5 items that you have highlighted here: transparency, impact assessment, regulatory information, predictability, and of course, window for redress. Where do you think the Nigerian regulators are lagging most in this?
Well, they are lagging in practically in all aspects of these metrics. Because if you talk of transparency and inclusiveness, it doesn't occur most times. Of course, there are a few of them. If they are rolling out a regulation, they will throw it out. They will invite comments from the stakeholders. In fairness, some of them do it, but many of them don't. They will just roll it out, and that's it. You either take it or leave it. Then in terms of the regulatory impact assessment, that hardly happens. Even when the stakeholders are complaining about the quality of regulation, most times the regulators don't care. And the legitimacy of a legislation, of a regulation, the confidence that it breeds, is also a function of how, to the extent to which we're able to carry the stakeholders along. Because those things engender trust, they also engender better compliance with the regulation. So even on the score of being inclusive, you don't have much, or even the issue of regulatory impact assessment. It hardly happens. And when you have a political leadership that listens only to the regulator, that is not listening to the stakeholders, you are not looking at the impact on consumers, you are not looking at the impact on society, you are not looking at the impact on even investors, then we have a problem. So it is an important component that we need to embed in the regulatory governance space, And in terms of predictability and window for dispute resolution, that doesn't exist at all. Because, just as you said, the regulator is the alpha and the omega.
So nobody oversees the regulator?
No. I mean, there's no room for appeal once there's a ruling. And incidentally, the regulator is the accuser and also the judge. And once there's a ruling, that's it. Where do you go to? The best you can do is to go to court. You can be in court forever. And in any case, because of the intimidating environment that has been created, many players are even afraid to even express or even explore the option of going to court because it's a very intimidating environment. So we need to relax some of these things. We need to understand that we are all aiming for the same objective, to grow the economy, to improve the investment environment. So these are the key issues around regulatory governance.
Perhaps these are some of the regulatory risks that investors see there.
Yes. I mean, just as you said in your intro, regulatory risk is a major risk. Maybe you go to a bank, you get a loan of $1 billion or $2 billion, you put an investment in place based on existing regulations. You wake up the following morning, the regulation has changed. That can put the whole investment in jeopardy.
I don't know if you remember the Okada ban, how it affected one of those companies.
The Okada ban, the exclusion of some raw materials from foreign exchange markets, the closure of the border. There are so many things that are happening. Around trade policy, around tariffs, around ban, around all sorts of, even capitalization. Some of these things have led to the collapse of many businesses and escalates the regulatory risk. So in order to moderate the regulatory risk and make the environment more attractive, we need to address all of these concerns.
How do we begin to address it? How do we go about it? How do we resolve these issues that have been identified?
It's an advocacy thing.
And that's where you come in.
Yes. The conversation we are having today is part of it. We need to put these issues on the table. If you really want to grow the investment environment, if you really want the economy to prosper, we have to take all of these things into account. It's not just worrying about oil price and whether it's going up or going down. We need to worry about the quality of regulatory governance.
All right. So, thank you very much, Dr.
Muda.
Yusuf, for your time.
Okay, we didn't have time to discuss even the report itself.
Well, I guess our time is really okay. But, well, before I let you go, talking about this report, which you talked about, transactional accountability, process consistency, and operational transparency. So one would ask the key findings in this.
The key findings really is about relationship between regulators and the SMEs in particular.
Okay.
The challenges of using online transactions so that there is no minimum face-to-face, the challenges of using intermediaries, the challenges of unreceipted payments, all of these are issues. But I must also say that these agencies, in our interaction with them, have also showed us what they are doing to be able to tackle quite a lot of this. We had interaction with FRS, we had interaction with NAFDAC, and they were able to put on the table the steps they are taking to ensure the reform of their processes, to make it more transparent and to make it more investment friendly.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Muda Yusuf.
Thank you so much.
We wish you luck as you continue with your advocacy, work.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your time with us today. Dr. Muda Yusuf is the Director General, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry.